The Dragon King's clawed hand closed around the fabric binding my chest, and time itself seemed to hold its breath. "No!" My foster father's voice tore through the throne room, but it was already too late. The bindings ripped. Gasps rippled through the assembled court. I felt the cool air against my skin, felt every eye fix upon me with shock and horror. 18 years of deception unraveling in a single, devastating moment. Dragon King Zephyrion's golden eyes widened, the fury in their depths transformed into something far more dangerous. Fascination. "A woman," he breathed. "You brought me a woman disguised as a man." I should have been terrified. Instead, I found myself frozen, watching something unfold behind those ancient, inhuman eyes that made my breath catch. But let me tell you how I got here. Chapter 1. 18 years ago, General Thandorius returned from war to find his wife Estraline dead in childbirth and an infant daughter in his arms. In Valcrest, that was a death sentence. Every noble daughter had to be given to the dragon throne at 18, claimed as tribute to bear dragon children. For 300 years, the Treaty of Fire had bound our kingdom to this fate. Dragon blood needed human vessels to continue. The alternative was war with creatures that could burn entire cities in minutes. Some called it survival. Others called it what it truly was: breeding slavery dressed in diplomatic language. Thandorius looked at me, looked at his dead wife, and made a choice that defied every law of our land. He dismissed the midwife with enough gold to ensure her silence. He burned his wife's body with full military honors, claiming she and the baby both perished. And then he took me into hiding for 6 months, while he let his grief become legendary. When he finally emerged, from mourning, he had a son. A boy named Oliver, dark-haired and fierce-eyed, already showing promise with a wooden sword. That boy was me. I learned to walk like a boy, talk like a boy, fight like a boy. I bound my chest when my body began to betray me. I kept my hair short and my voice low. I trained harder than any recruit, pushed myself further, bled more, because I had to be better than everyone else just to maintain the lie. By 16, I was the youngest captain in the king's army. By 17, I'd led 3 successful campaigns against border raiders. The men under my command never questioned me. Why would they? I fought beside them, bled beside them, drank with them around campfires, and never once revealed the truth. I was good at being Oliver. Sometimes I wondered if the girl named Olivia had ever really existed at all, or if she died with my mother on that blood-soaked birthing bed. Then the summons came. The Dragon King was holding a tournament. The strongest warriors in Valcrest would compete for the honor of becoming Dragon General, commander of the aerial forces, second only to Zephyrion himself. It was the highest military position in the kingdom. But what interested me was what came with it. Access to the Dragon Vault, where ancient treaties and texts were kept. I'd spent years researching in secret, and I'd found references to something called the Original Compact, the first agreement between dragons and humans, made before Zephyrion's father had twisted it into the breeding program. If I could find that document, if I could prove the Treaty of Fire had been corrupted from its original purpose, maybe, just maybe, I could free every woman in Valcrest from the fate that should have been mine. It was worth the risk. It had to be. Thandorius tried to talk me out of it. The night before I left for the Dragon's Fortress, he sat across from me in our modest quarters, his weathered face drawn with worry. "You've survived this long by staying beneath notice," he said quietly. "The Dragon King will be watching every contestant closely. Dragons can sense things we can't. Magic, emotion, truth. If Zephyrion suspects, he won't." I sharpened my sword with steady strokes, the familiar motion calming my nerves. "I've been Oliver for 18 years. One more performance won't break me." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the grief there, the guilt he'd carried since my mother's death. Finally, he reached out and gripped my shoulder the way he would a son. "If anything happens, run. Don't think of honor or duty or anything else. Just run, and don't stop until you're beyond the borders. Promise me." I promised. It was a lie, but it gave him comfort. The dragon's fortress crouched atop the spire of eternal flame, a mountain that had been carved and reshaped by dragon fire until it resembled a massive talon reaching toward the sky. The approach alone took 2 days of climbing, a deliberate test of endurance that eliminated the week before the tournament even began. I made the ascent with 30 other warriors, all of them chosen from the finest units in Valcrest. Some I knew from past campaigns, others were strangers, but I could read them easily enough. Ambition, desperation, the hunger for glory that drove all soldiers toward legendary feats. None of them knew they were climbing beside a woman who had more to lose than all of them combined. The tournament lasted 3 brutal days. Combat, strategy, endurance, leadership, every aspect of a warrior's skill tested to breaking point. I fought like my life depended on it, because it did. In the final bout, I faced a massive warrior named Craven, who'd earned his reputation crushing rebellions in the southern provinces. He was stronger, more experienced, but I was faster, more adaptable. I'd learned long ago that I couldn't rely on brute strength the way other warriors could. I had to be smarter, more precise. I won. Barely. The court erupted, in applause. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, when Dragon King Zephyrion rose from his throne and began walking toward me, I knew something was terribly wrong. "An impressive display," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. "You fight like someone with everything to lose, Captain Oliver. I wonder why that is." He circled me slowly, and I fought the urge to track his movement like prey tracking a predator. "Tell me, Captain, how long have you been lying to me?" My heart stopped. "I can smell it on you," he said quietly, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. "Beneath the sweat and leather and steel, something different. Something you've been desperately trying to hide." The court pressed closer, sensing drama. I saw Thandorius near the back of the crowd, his face ashen. Zephyrion stopped directly in front of me. We were nearly the same height, and those golden eyes bored into mine with an intensity that felt like it could see straight through to my soul. "Show me," he commanded. "Show me what you're hiding, or I'll do it myself." I had perhaps 3 seconds to make a choice. Run and admit my deception, deny it and be proven a liar, or— "The binding is old," I said quietly, just loud enough for him to hear. "If you tear it carelessly, it could damage—" His hand shot out faster than I could track, claws extending just slightly. The fabric of my tunic ripped like paper. Which brought us back to the beginning. To this moment, standing in the throne room with my secret literally laid bare, watching the Dragon King's fury transform into something I couldn't quite name. Zephyrian's hand hadn't moved from where it rested against the torn fabric. His claws had retracted, but I could feel the heat of his skin even through my undershirt, could feel the tension in his body that suggested he was restraining himself through sheer force of will. "Guards," he said softly, never taking his eyes from mine. "Clear the room. Everyone out." "Your Majesty!" Lord Malacris, the Chancellor, stepped forward with his hands spread in diplomatic placation. "Perhaps we should discuss the legal implications before—" "Out!" The word came out in a draconic roar that shook dust from the ancient rafters. Every person in that room fled, including Thandorius, though I saw him cast one last desperate look over my shoulder before the guards forced him through the doors. The silence that followed was deafening. Zephyrion finally stepped back, his hand falling away. He turned from me and walked several paces toward his throne before stopping, his shoulders tense beneath that black scale armor. "Do you know what the punishment is for deception of this magnitude?" His voice was controlled again, carefully measured. "What the law requires I do to anyone who evades the tribute system." "Death," I said quietly. "Public execution, to serve as a warning to others who might try the same. And yet you stand here having won my tournament, through skill that cannot be denied." He turned to face me, and I saw the conflict written across his inhuman features. "You've placed me in an impossible position. Then let me solve it for you." I straightened my spine, lifting my chin in defiance even though every survival instinct screamed at me to bow, to beg. "Kill me if you must, but know that I regret nothing. I chose to live as something other than a breeding slave. I chose to fight for my kingdom rather than be handed over like livestock. If that's worth dying for, so be it." Something flickered in those golden eyes. Respect? Admiration? Before I could identify it, his expression hardened. "You misunderstand," he said coldly. "I'm not going to kill you. That would be far too merciful." He moved toward me again with that same predatory grace, and I held my ground even though everything in me wanted to run. "You are 18 years old, are you not? Of noble blood? Raised by General Thandorius?" Ice flooded my veins. "Yes, then the law is quite clear." He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could see flecks of amber in those golden eyes. "You belong to me. The tribute is owed, and the tribute will be paid." "I won your tournament," I snarled, anger finally breaking through my fear. "I earned the position of Dragon General through skill and blood. You can't simply—" "I can do whatever I wish. I am the Dragon King, and you are my property now." His hand shot out and gripped my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. His touch was firm but not painful, and the heat of his skin against mine sent an unwelcome shiver down my spine. "But here's what fascinates me, little warrior. In 300 years, no one has dared deceive me the way you have. You've lived as a soldier, fought in wars, commanded men. You've done everything the tribute system was designed to prevent." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my face. "So I'm going to make you an offer. 3 days from now, there's a ritual, the claiming, we call it. It's when I would traditionally consummate the tribute arrangement." The way he said it made my stomach turn. "But you have 3 days before that happens. 3 days to convince me that the Treaty of Fire should be broken, that I should defy 300 years of tradition, risk war with my own kind, and free every woman in Valcrest from their obligation." Hope flared in my chest, dangerous and desperate. "And if I succeed? Then I'll do it. I'll destroy the treaty, end the tribute system, and grant you your freedom." His smile was sharp and ancient. "But if you fail to convince me, if you can't give me a reason strong enough to risk everything, then you become what you were always meant to be. Mine." Before I could respond, he released my chin and stepped back, gesturing toward a side door I hadn't noticed before. "Take her to the Eastern Tower," he called out, and guards materialized from the shadows. "See that she's provided with appropriate accommodations." "Wait!" I started forward, but the guards were already flanking me, their grips gentle but immovable. "What kind of argument could possibly convince you? What do you want me to say?" Zephyrion's smile widened, showing just a hint of fang. "If I told you that, it wouldn't be a very fair test, would it? You have 3 days, Oliver. Or should I call you Olivia now?" He tilted his head, studying me with those unsettling eyes. 3 days to show me why 300 years of tradition should end. Make them count. The guards began to lead me away. "Oh, and Olivia?" Zephyrion's voice stopped me at the doorway. "Don't bother trying to escape. You won't make it past the outer walls, and even if you did, I'd find you. Dragons have excellent noses for tracking what belongs to them." The door closed behind me with a sound of finality. I woke the next morning to silk. The sensation was so alien that for a moment I thought I was still dreaming. Silk sheets against my skin, silk curtains filtering golden sunlight, silk nightgown replacing the rough cotton shirt I'd fallen asleep in. I sat up so fast the room spun. This wasn't the cell I'd expected. This was a chamber fit for royalty, all carved black stone and elegant furnishings, with a massive bed that could have slept 5 people comfortably. A wardrobe stood open against one wall, revealing gowns in every color imaginable. Gowns, not a single piece of practical clothing in sight. "Good, you're awake." A woman appeared in the doorway, small and dark-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. "I'm Sylveth, and I've been assigned as your handmaiden. His Majesty requests your presence at breakfast in 1 hour." I pulled the silk sheets up instinctively, though the nightgown covered more than my usual sleeping attire. "Where are my clothes?" "Burned, I'm afraid." Sylveth moved into the room with efficient grace, selecting a gown of deep crimson from the wardrobe. "His Majesty was quite specific. You're to dress as befits your station from now on." "My station as his prisoner, you mean?" "His tribute," she corrected me with a slight smile. "There's a difference. Now, we have limited time, and you need to bathe before I can even begin to make you presentable." The next hour was a special kind of torture. Sylveth scrubbed away 18 years of carefully cultivated masculinity with ruthless efficiency, washing my short hair until it actually had a shine to it, applying subtle cosmetics that made my features look softer, more feminine. When she finally laced me into that crimson gown, I barely recognized the woman staring back from the mirror. "You're quite beautiful, you know," Sylveth said quietly, "when you're not trying so hard to be something else." I didn't respond. Couldn't. Because looking at that stranger in the mirror made something crack, inside me, some wall I'd built around the girl I might have been if things had been different. "Is this part of it?" I asked finally. "Part of his test? Dressing me up like a doll?" "I don't know what His Majesty has planned," Sylveth said, though something in her tone suggested she knew more than she was saying. "But I do know that he's never offered anyone 3 days before. Usually the tributes are claimed within hours of arrival. You've already gotten something no one else has. Time." "Time to what? Argue against 300 years of tradition? Time to show him who you really are." She met my eyes in the mirror. "Not Oliver the soldier, not Olivia the tribute, just you. Whoever that is." The words stayed with me as I made my way to breakfast, my feet uncertain in the ridiculous slippers Sylviath had forced onto me. Zephyrion was waiting in a private dining room that overlooked the kingdom far below. He'd apparently abandoned the intimidating armor from yesterday in favor of simpler clothes, black shirt and trousers that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less. More human. More real. He rose when I entered, and his eyes tracked over me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Much better," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "Please sit." I sat because my legs felt unsteady. The table was laden with enough food for 10 people. Fruits and pastries, meats and cheeses, delicacies I'd never even seen before. "I'm not hungry." "You will be." He poured 2 glasses of wine with casual grace. "We have a long day ahead of us." "Doing what?" "Preparing for you to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "No," His voice was sharp. I told you, 3 days. I'm giving you 3 days to make your case. Today, I want to show you something. What? The truth. He took a sip of wine, watching me over the rim of the glass. You came here looking for information about the original compact, didn't you? Evidence that the Treaty of Fire was corrupted from its original purpose? I stared at him. How did you? I'm 300 years old, Olivia. I've learned to recognize the look of someone on a desperate mission. He set down his glass. You weren't here just to win a tournament. You were here to find something specific, something you believed could free the women of Valcrest. There was no point in denying it. Yes. Then let me show you what you came to find. He stood, offering his hand. Come with me to the vault. Let me show you the truth about the Treaty of Fire, and then you can decide whether your arguments have any merit. I stared at his outstretched hand, suspicion warring with curiosity. Why would you help me build a case against you? Something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like pain. Because I want you to succeed, Olivia. I want you to convince me. I want you to give me a reason strong enough to finally end this. The raw honesty in his voice made my breath catch. This wasn't the cruel tyrant I'd expected. This was someone who sounded almost desperate. I took his hand. Chapter 2. Zephyrion led me through twisting corridors deep into the mountain, down passages that seemed to have been carved by claws rather than tools. We passed guards who bowed deeply, their expressions carefully neutral when they saw me in the gown, holding the Dragon King's hand. Finally, we reached a massive doorway carved with symbols I didn't recognize, sealed with magic that made the air itself seem heavy. The Dragon Vault, Zephyrion said quietly. He placed his hand against the stone, and I watched in fascination as his blood, golden and luminous, welled up and sank into the carvings. The door groaned open, revealing darkness beyond. He conjured a ball of flame that floated ahead of us, illuminating a chamber that took my breath away. It was massive, easily the size of the throne room, with shelves spiraling up toward a domed ceiling. Ancient texts, scrolls, artifacts, centuries of collected knowledge and history packed into this single space. 300 years ago, Zephyrion began, his voice echoing strangely in the vast chamber. My father ruled the dragon clans with an iron claw. He believed dragons were superior to all other races, that we were meant to dominate, to subjugate. When the humans of Valcrest started to grow in power, started to develop weapons that could actually harm dragons, he saw it as an insult, an affront to the natural order. He moved deeper into the vault, and I followed, watching the way the flamelight played across his features. So he declared war, burned 3 cities to ash in a single night, killed thousands. Zephyrian's jaw tightened. I was young then, barely a century old. I argued against him, said we could find peace, coexistence. That strength didn't have to mean cruelty. What happened? He laughed at me, called me weak, said I was too human-hearted to ever be a proper Dragon King. He stopped at a particular shelf, pulling down a scroll that looked ancient even by dragon standards. But the humans surprised him. They fought back with a ferocity he hadn't expected. The war lasted 5 years, and by the end, both sides had lost too much. My father's favorite mate was killed by a human archer. 3 of the Dragon Clan's elders were dead. Half of Valcrest's cities lay in ruins. He unrolled the scroll on a reading table, and I saw it was covered in text written in 2 languages. One I recognized as Old Valcrestian, the other in swooping, sharp characters I didn't know. This is the original compact, Zephyrion said quietly. The first treaty between dragons and humans. It was supposed to be a peace agreement. Dragons would protect Valcrest from external threats, Raiders, rival kingdoms, natural disasters. In exchange, humans would provide tribute. Women, I said bitterly. No. He looked at me, and I saw genuine pain in his eyes. Gold, livestock, crafted goods. The tribute was supposed to be material, Olivia. A tax, essentially. Dragons protecting the kingdom in exchange for wealth. I stared at the scroll, trying to process what he was saying. Then how? My father. Zephyrion's voice went hard. 6 months after the compact was signed, he added the Treaty of Fire, a secret addendum that only the Dragon King and the Human King knew about. It stated that every noble daughter of age would be given to the dragon throne. Officially, it was framed as a way to ensure lasting peace through blood ties. In reality, it was about control, I finished. About making sure humans could never rebel again. Because if they did, their daughters would pay the price. Yes. He moved away from the table, running a hand through his long, dark hair. And about something darker. My father believed that dragons breeding with humans would create a superior hybrid race. Stronger than humans, more numerous than pure dragons, he wanted to build an empire. The horror of it settled over me like a physical weight. Did he? No, he died before he could claim his first tribute. Zephyrion's expression was unreadable. I killed him. Challenged him for the throne and won. That was 290 years ago. I processed this information slowly. But you've been continuing the tribute system. For 3 centuries, you've been... Yes. The single word carried the weight of centuries of guilt. Because the Treaty of Fire wasn't just a legal document. My father wove magic into it. Blood magic, binding magic. The kind that can't be easily broken. If I refuse to accept the tributes, if I try to end the system, the magic activates. Every current tribute in the fortress dies instantly. Every noble family that's ever given a daughter loses their eldest living child. The death toll would be in the thousands. He turned to face me fully, and I saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been trapped in an impossible situation for longer than I could imagine. So yes, I've continued it. Because the alternative was mass death. I've taken the tributes, 1 or 2 each year, and I've... He stopped, jaw clenching. I've never touched them. Never consummated anything. I give them comfortable chambers, allow them to pursue whatever interests they wish. Most choose to leave after a few years, once they realize I'm not going to force them into anything. A few have stayed, become advisors or scholars or artisans. But I've never done what my father intended. I wanted to feel relief at that. Instead, I felt my carefully constructed understanding of the world tilting beneath me. Then why tell everyone you do? Why maintain the fiction that you're... I couldn't finish. Because if the truth got out, if people knew the Treaty of Fire was a bluff, that I wasn't actually enforcing it, the magic would recognize the breach, and people would die. He moved back to the scroll, his finger tracing the strange dragon script. My father was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He made sure I would be trapped by his cruelty even after his death. There has to be a way to break it, I said, moving closer to the table. Every spell has a counterspell. Every binding has a key. I've spent 300 years searching for that key. His hand slammed down on the table with enough force to make me jump. Every expert, every magical text, every ancient dragon still living. I've consulted them all. The only way to break blood magic this powerful is to either kill everyone bound by it, or what? He looked at me, and something in his expression made my heart skip. Or the caster's heir willingly chooses to end it, accepting the full backlash of the magic onto themselves. Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. You mean you have to die? Yes. He said it simply, matter-of-factly. I have to die to break it. Not just die, I have to willingly surrender my life force to unmake the spell. It will consume everything I am. There won't even be a body to bury. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Then why are you showing me this? Why tell me any of it? Because you asked the right question. He moved around the table toward me. You didn't ask, how do I escape the system? You asked, how do I destroy it? That means you think about more than just yourself. You think about every woman who'll come after you, every girl not yet born who'll grow up under this threat. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. And because for the first time in 300 years, I've met someone who might actually give me a good enough reason to finally do it, to finally end this nightmare my father created. My breath caught. You're asking me to convince you to die. I'm asking you to convince me that my death would mean something, that it would create a world worth the sacrifice. His hand came up, hesitating just shy of touching my face. 3 days, Olivia. Show me that world. Show me why I should believe in it enough to give up everything. The intensity in his eyes was almost painful to witness. This wasn't a game or a test. This was a man, a dragon, who'd been trapped in an impossible situation for longer than most kingdoms had existed, finally seeing a potential way out. And he was asking me to give him the courage to take it. I don't know how, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know what argument could possibly be worth your life. Then don't argue. He finally allowed his hand to cup my face, the touch gentle despite the heat of his skin. Just show me who you are. Show me the woman who was brave enough to live as someone else for 18 years. Show me the soldier who won my tournament. Show me the person who thinks the freedom of others is worth risking everything for. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I felt something shift in the air between us, something dangerous and electric. Show me, he said quietly, that there are still people in this world worth dying for. Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, he dropped his hand and stepped back. Come, there's more I want to show you. If you're going to make your case, you need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. He led me deeper into the vault, to a section lined with what looked like journals. Hundreds of them, leather-bound and ancient. Every Dragon King is required to keep a record, Zephyrion explained. A chronicle of their reign. These go back 2,000 years. He pulled down one of the newer-looking volumes. This is mine. 300 years of trying to find a way out of my father's trap. He opened it to a random page, and I saw neat, precise handwriting covering the paper. Year 247. Consulted with the Witch Queen of the Northern Wastes. She confirmed what the others have said. Blood magic of this magnitude requires the caster's bloodline to unmake. She suggested I could have a child, wait for them to come of age, and have them perform the ritual instead. I told her I would rather die myself than pass this curse to another generation. She called me a fool. Perhaps she's right. You never wanted children? I asked, surprised by the revelation. I never wanted to create more prisoners. He closed the journal. Every dragon child born to a dragon king inherits the magical bindings their parent carries. If I had a child, they would be bound by the Treaty of Fire the same way I am. They would live their entire life trapped by my father's cruelty, just wearing a different face. He pulled down another journal, this one much older. This is my father's chronicle. Would you like to see what he wrote when he created the Treaty of Fire? I nodded, though part of me didn't want to know. Zephyrion opened it to a marked page and began to read aloud. The humans believe they have won a victory. They believe the compact gives them safety, protection, a future. Fools. Today I added the Treaty of Fire, and that naive boy who calls himself my son signed off on it without even reading the details. He thinks I'm creating blood ties for peace. He doesn't understand that I'm building the foundation of a new world order. In 10 generations, every noble line in Valcrest will carry dragon blood. Their kingdoms will be mine. Their children will be mine. And that weakling Zephyrion will have no choice but to enforce it, or watch thousands die. He will learn that mercy is weakness. He will learn what it means to be a true dragon king. Or he will learn what it means to be a kinslayer. The casual cruelty in the words made my stomach turn. This was the mind that had created the system that had shaped my entire life, that had forced my mother to die, giving birth to me in secret, that had made me into Oliver instead of letting me be Olivia. Your father was a monster, I said quietly. Yes. Zephyrion closed the journal carefully. And for 300 years, I've been enforcing his monstrous creation, because the alternative was worse. Because letting thousands die to spite a dead tyrant seemed like the greater evil. He turned to face me fully. But you've changed something, Olivia. You slipped through the cracks of his system. You became something he never anticipated. A woman who claimed power on her own terms, who refused to be what he wanted to shape her into. And seeing you stand in my throne room, defiant even with your secret exposed. He trailed off, something raw and almost vulnerable crossing his face. It made me think that maybe, just maybe, there's finally a generation strong enough to build something better. Something that doesn't need my father's nightmare to hold it together. I found myself moving closer to him, without consciously deciding to. What are you really asking me? Zephyrion! I'm asking you to give me hope. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'm asking you to show me that the world 3 days from now, a world without me in it, but also without the Treaty of Fire, would be worth creating. That the women who will grow up free will be strong enough, brave enough, to build something that lasts. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. The heat of his skin should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like an anchor. And selfishly, he continued, I'm asking you to make these 3 days matter. Because if I'm going to die, if I'm going to give up everything I am to break my father's curse, I want to know what it feels like to have a real choice. To spend time with someone who sees me as more than just the Dragon King. Someone who might actually understand. The vulnerability in his voice, the desperate loneliness beneath the words, cracked something open in my chest. This wasn't the monster I'd been prepared to face. This was someone who'd been trapped in an impossible situation for longer than my kingdom had existed, finally seeing a way out, even if that way was death. I don't know if I can do what you're asking, I admitted. I don't know if I'm brave enough or strong enough or... You lived as someone else for 18 years, he interrupted gently. You won a tournament against warriors who'd been training their whole lives. You stood in my throne room and told me you regretted nothing, even facing execution. Olivia, you're the bravest person I've met in 3 centuries. His free hand came up to cup my face again. So please, show me that bravery for 3 more days. Show me a world worth dying for. And then, with a gentleness that stole my breath, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to mine. We stood there in the quiet of the vault, surrounded by centuries of history and pain and trapped choices, and I felt something fundamental shift between us. This wasn't captor and prisoner anymore. This wasn't even Dragon King and tribute. This was 2 people who'd both been trapped by circumstances beyond their control, finally finding someone who understood. 3 days, I whispered. 3 days, he agreed. And then you die to free us all. Yes. That's the worst deal I've ever heard. His laugh was quiet and sad. I know. but it's the only one I have to offer." I pulled back enough to look into his eyes, those strange, beautiful golden eyes that held centuries of loneliness and hope and resignation all tangled together. "Then we'd better make them count," I said. And for the first time since I'd met him, Zephyrion smiled. A real smile, not the sharp political one he'd worn in the throne room. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost hopeful. "Yes," he said softly. "We'd better." He released me then, stepping back with visible effort. "Come, it's nearly midday, and there's something else I want to show you, something that might help you understand what you'd be preserving if the Treaty of Fire ended." "What's that?" "The tributes who chose to stay." His expression gentled. "The women who were given to me and decided to make lives here anyway. I want you to meet them, to see what they've built despite everything. Because if you're going to argue for a better world, you should see the glimpses of it that already exist." He offered his hand again, and after only a moment's hesitation, I took it. As we walked back through the vault toward the entrance, I found myself studying his profile, the way the flame light played across his features. 3 days ago, he'd been the enemy, the embodiment of everything I'd been fighting against. Now he was something else entirely, and that terrified me more than any of the rest of it. Chapter 3. Zephyrion led me to a wing of the fortress I hadn't seen before. Unlike the imposing throne rooms and martial training grounds, this section felt almost domestic. Warm light spilled from open doorways, and I could hear voices, women's voices, talking and laughing. "There are currently 7 tributes in residence," Zephyrion explained as we walked. "All of them chose to stay rather than return to their families. They've built quite a community here." We stopped outside a large, sunlit room that appeared to be some kind of workshop. Through the doorway, I could see women of various ages bent over projects, one working at a loom, another painting an elaborate canvas, a third surrounded by books and scrolls. "May we enter?" Zephyrion called out. "Of course, Your Majesty." The woman at the loom looked up, smiling warmly. She appeared to be in her 40s, with silver starting to thread through her dark hair. "And you've brought a guest. Is this the mysterious tournament? Winner everyone's been gossiping about?" "This is Olivia," Zephyrion said, his hand gentle at the small of my back as he guided me into the room. "She has some questions about how the tribute system actually works. I thought you all might provide better answers than I could." The woman at the loom stood, brushing thread from her dress. "I'm Helena. I came here 23 years ago, right after my 18th birthday. My father was convinced I'd be, well, you know what everyone thinks happens to tributes." She exchanged a knowing look with the other women. Imagine my surprise when the Dragon King showed me to a private suite and told me I was free to pursue whatever interested me. "You stayed for 23 years? I couldn't keep the shock from my voice. Where else would I go?" Helena shrugged. "Back to my father's house where I'd be married off to whatever lord offered the best political alliance. Here I can weave. I can create. I've built a business selling my textiles to merchants from 3 kingdoms. I'm wealthy in my own right, beholden to no one." She smiled. "The irony is that becoming a tribute gave me more freedom than I ever would have had as a noble daughter." The woman surrounded by books looked up. She was younger, maybe late 20s, with sharp, intelligent eyes. "I'm Meredith. I've been here 6 years. When I arrived, I thought I was being sent to a monster. Instead, I found a library that would make the University of Astoria weep with envy, and a Dragon King who actually listened when I told him I wanted to study ancient languages rather than warm his bed." She gestured to the scrolls around her. "I'm currently translating pre-compact dragon texts. Some of them haven't been read by human eyes in over 1,000 years. His Majesty has given me unlimited access to the vault and funding for my research. The painter spoke next, not looking up from her canvas. She was the youngest, probably only a year or two past 18. I'm Sabine. Came here last spring. My family was devastated, thought I was going to be ruined, but I'd never been allowed to paint before. Said it wasn't suitable for a lady. She finally glanced at me, her expression wry. Here. No one tells me what's suitable. I paint what I want. His Majesty even commissioned 3 pieces for the Great Hall. I looked at Zephyrion, who had remained quiet during the introductions. He met my eyes with an expression I couldn't quite read. The others are at the market in town, he explained, or working in their own studios, but the pattern is the same. They all came expecting horror. They all found freedom instead. Because you never... I stopped, unsure how to phrase it delicately. Because he's not his father, Helena finished for me. We all know the stories. We all know what the treaty was supposed to be about. But whatever the Dragon King's father intended, this one has spent 3 centuries subverting it. She looked at Zephyrion with something like fondness. He's a better man than most humans I've known. I'm not a man at all, Zephyrion said dryly. I'm a dragon who occasionally pretends to be one. Semantics, Meredith dismissed with a wave. The point stands. You've protected us, given us resources and freedom and respect. Most noble daughters don't get even one of those things, let alone all 3. I felt something uncomfortable twisting in my chest. I'd spent 18 years imagining the Dragon King as a monster, the tributes as victims. This reality was far more complicated. But you're still prisoners, I said. You can't leave without his permission. You're still bound by the treaty. Can't we? Helena interrupted gently. Olivia, I've left the fortress dozens of times. I have trade contacts in 5 cities. I visit my sister twice a year. His Majesty has never stopped me. She tilted her head. Have you ever actually tried to leave? That's different. I just arrived. And yet you could walk out that door right now if you wanted, Zephyrion said quietly. I told you you had 3 days. I never said you had to spend them here. You could leave. Go back to your father. I wouldn't stop you. I stared at him. But you said I belonged to you, that the tribute was owed. I said that because the court expected to hear it, because maintaining the fiction is what keeps the treaty's magic satisfied. He moved closer. But in reality, Olivia, you've never been a prisoner. You've always been free to go. You just haven't chosen to yet. The realization washed over me. Then what is this? What have these 3 days been about? Choice, he said simply. I'm giving you the choice to stay or go, to help me end this system or to walk away and let it continue. Everything you do from this moment forward is your decision, not mine. Helena cleared her throat softly. I think what His Majesty is trying to say, in his typically circuitous dragon way, is that he's never wanted to force anyone into anything. The whole point of his reign has been subverting his father's system without triggering its deadly failsafes. Until now, Meredith added, her sharp eyes moving between Zephyrion and me. Until you. You're different somehow, aren't you? Special? I'm not special, I protested. I'm just the first woman in 300 years to live completely outside the system, Zephyrion interrupted. The first to prove that the treaty's magic can be evaded, which means it can be broken. He looked at me with that same intense focus from the vault. You're the evidence I needed that my father's spell is finally weakening enough to destroy. And that destruction requires your death, I said flatly. The room went silent. The 3 women exchanged glances. then looked at Zephyrion with varying expressions of shock and horror. "Your Majesty," Helena started. "It's the only way," Zephyrion said, his voice steady. "You all know I've been searching for an alternative for decades. There isn't one. Blood magic this strong requires the caster's bloodline to unmake it, and I refuse to pass this curse to a child." "Then we find another way," Sabine said fiercely. "We keep searching. There has to be—" "There isn't." Zephyrion's tone was final. "And more importantly, I don't want there to be. I've lived 300 years trapped by my father's cruelty. I've watched generations of women grow up knowing they'd be given away at 18. I've maintained a lie that made me a monster in the eyes of everyone who didn't know the truth." He looked at each of the women in turn. "I'm tired, and I'm ready to end it, if someone can just give me a good enough reason to believe the world that comes after will be better." Helena moved forward and took one of his hands in both of hers. "You've given all of us a better life than we ever would have had otherwise. You've given us freedom, purpose, safety. That's worth something." "It's worth everything," Meredith agreed. "But it's not enough to save an entire kingdom. 7 of us living well doesn't change the fact that hundreds of other women still live in fear, still grow up knowing they have no control over their own futures." "Exactly," Zephyrion said quietly. "Which is why I need Olivia to show me that a world without the Treaty of Fire would be strong enough to stand on its own. That the women of Valcrest are ready for that freedom." He looked at me, and the weight of his gaze was almost crushing. "So tell me, Olivia, having seen what I've built within the constraints of my father's system, having met the women who've made lives here, do you still think the system should end? Even if ending it means my death?" Every eye in the room fixed on me, waiting for my answer. I thought about my mother, dying to birth me in secret. About Thandorius, spending 18 years maintaining an elaborate deception to keep me safe. About every woman in Valcrest who lived with the knowledge that her daughter, if she had one, would be claimed at 18. I thought about what Zephyrion had built within his constraints, a refuge for women who would otherwise have had none, a subversion of his father's cruelty, but still a system built on fear, on the threat of what would happen if the fiction wasn't maintained. "Yes," I said finally, "it should end. Because this—" I gestured around the room, at the workshop, and the women who'd found freedom here. "This is beautiful, but it's still built on a foundation of cruelty. It's still a cage, even if you've made the bars as comfortable as possible." Zephyrion's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Hope? Relief? "And you think women would be strong enough without it? Without the protection the treaty provides, however twisted that protection is?" "I don't think women need protection from you," I said. "I think they need protection from a system that treats them like bargaining chips. And yes, I think we'd be strong enough without it. We'd have to be. Because the alternative is continuing to live like this, waiting for someone else to save us, hoping the next Dragon King will be as benevolent as you." I moved closer to him, holding his gaze. "You've spent 300 years being better than your father, being kinder, more merciful. But you're still alone, trapped, maintaining a system you hate. And one day you'll die anyway. Dragons aren't immortal. What happens when your heir claims the throne? What happens if they're more like your father than you?" "I have no heir," Zephyrion said quietly. "Exactly. So the system will fail eventually anyway, and probably in a much worse way. At least this way, your way, it ends with intention, with purpose, with a chance to build something better." Helena made a small sound, half sob, half laugh. "She's right. Gods help us all, but she's right." "Of course she is," Meredith said, wiping at her eyes. "Which is why His Majesty brought her here. He wanted us to confirm it, to tell him it was worth it. Is it? Zephyrion asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Is my death worth the possibility, not even guarantee, just the possibility, of a better world? Yes, I said, even though the word felt like swallowing broken glass. Because somehow, in the space of a day and a half, this dragon who'd been my enemy had become something else. Someone I was starting to understand, maybe even care about. And I was agreeing that he should die. Then I have one request, Zephyrion said. One condition before I commit to this. What? Spend the rest of your 3 days with me, not arguing or debating or trying to prove anything. Just be with me. Let me see who you are when you're not hiding behind armor or anger or carefully constructed arguments. Let me know the person I'm doing this for. His hand came up, hovering near my face but not quite touching. Because if I'm going to die, I want to know what it feels like to connect with someone. Really connect. Not as king to subject or dragon to tribute, but as two people who understand what it's like to be trapped by circumstances beyond their control. The request was so raw, so vulnerable, that it made my chest ache. He wasn't asking for physical intimacy. I could see that in his eyes. He was asking for something deeper, for understanding, for companionship, for a few days of not being alone before he gave up everything. How could I possibly say no to that? Okay, I whispered. Okay. His hand finally completed its journey, cupping my face with devastating gentleness. Thank you. Your Majesty, Helena said softly, if you're truly going to do this, if you're truly going to end the treaty, we need to prepare. We need to ensure that the transition doesn't cause chaos, that the noble families understand what's happening. I know. Zephyrion didn't take his eyes off me. That's why I'm giving you all a new task. Work with Drevencourt. Start drafting the legal framework for what comes after. Make sure that when the treaty falls, something better is ready to rise in its place. We will, Meredith promised. We'll make sure your sacrifice means something. Good. He finally dropped his hand, stepping back. Now, if you'll excuse us, I have 2 more days to show Olivia why this world might actually be worth saving. He offered me his hand again, and I took it without hesitation this time. As we left the workshop, I heard Helena say quietly to the others, "She's going to break his heart, you know, and he's going to let her, because that's what he needs to finally give up." The words followed us down the corridor, a prophecy that felt inevitable and terrible all at once. Zephyrion took me to the highest tower of the fortress as the sun began to set, to a platform open to the sky where the wind whipped around us in cold gusts. "I want to show you something," he said, moving to the edge where a low wall was all that stood between us and a 1,000-foot drop. "May I?" "May you what?" "Transform. Show you what I really am." He looked almost uncertain. "I know humans sometimes find dragon forms unsettling." "I've seen dragons before," I pointed out. "Your guards, the soldiers. You've seen dragons in human form with some draconic features showing through. You haven't seen a true dragon." He held my gaze. "And if I'm going to die to free your people, I want you to see what you're really freeing them from. What my father intended them to fear." "Show me," I said. He nodded once, then stepped back. I watched in fascination as his form began to shift and expand. It wasn't a painful transformation. It looked almost fluid, natural. His body elongated, grew massive. Scales rippled across his skin, black with edges that shimmered like oil on water. Wings unfurled from his back, vast and powerful. His face elongated into a dragon's muzzle, but those golden eyes remained the same. Intelligent, ancient, and somehow still undeniably him. When the transformation completed, I was staring up at a creature easily 50 feet long, with claws that could rend stone and teeth like swords. He should have been terrifying. He was magnificent. "This is what you really are," I breathed. "Yes." His voice echoed directly in my mind, resonant and layered with harmonics no human throat could produce. "This is the form I was born to. The form my father wore when he burned cities. The form that has haunted human nightmares for millennia." He lowered his massive head until one golden eye was level with me. "And this is what will cease to exist in 2 days. Not just the human shape I wear, but this too. All of it. When the backlash of breaking the blood magic hits, there will be nothing left of me to transform. I'll simply unmake." I reached out slowly, telegraphing my movement, and placed my hand against his scaled snout. The scales were warm, almost hot, and smooth as polished stone. "You're beautiful," I said quietly. "I'm a weapon, a predator. I was designed to kill and conquer. You're a person who chose to be better than your design." I moved closer, pressing my forehead against his scales. "That's what makes you beautiful." I felt something ripple through him, emotion too complex for me to name. Then his form began to shrink and shift again, returning to the human shape I was beginning to recognize. When he was fully human once more, standing before me in the twilight, I saw tears tracking down his face. Golden tears, like liquid sunlight. "I haven't cried in over a century," he said roughly. "Dragons don't cry easily. We burn too hot for it. But you—" He stopped, voice breaking. "You called me beautiful, the real me, not the human mask. You looked at what I truly am, and called it beautiful." I reached up and wiped the tears from his face, the liquid warm against my fingers. "Because you are." "I spent 300 years alone," he whispered. 300 years with no one who understood, no one who saw past the crown and the power and the fear. And now, with 2 days left, I finally meet someone who sees me. The cruelty of that timing is almost poetic." "Then we make these 2 days count," I said, echoing his words from earlier. "We make them mean something." He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me with a desperation that spoke of centuries of isolation. I held him back, feeling the way his body shook with suppressed emotion, and something fundamental shifted between us. This wasn't about the treaty anymore. This wasn't about arguments or freedom or political change. This was two lonely people finding each other in the worst possible circumstances, knowing their time was measured in hours. "Stay with me tonight," Zephyrion said against my hair. "Not as my tribute, not as someone trying to convince me, just as yourself, as Olivia. Let me know you before—" He stopped, but we both knew how the sentence ended. "Before I die." "Yes," I said, because what else could I say? How could I deny him this one small thing when he was giving up everything else? He pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes searching my face. "You don't have to. I'm not commanding you or expecting anything, I know." I cupped his face, feeling the warmth of his skin against my palms. "I want to. Whatever time we have left, I don't want to spend it apart." Something that looked like relief flooded his expression. He leaned down and pressed his forehead to mine, that same gesture from the vault, somehow more intimate than any kiss. "Thank you," he breathed. We stayed on that platform as the sun set and stars began to emerge, holding each other against the wind. And for the first time, since my mother died bringing me into this world, I felt like I might understand what it meant to be Olivia instead of Oliver. It meant choosing vulnerability, choosing connection, choosing to care about someone even when every logical instinct said it would only lead to pain. "Tell me about her," Zephyrion said after a long silence. "Your mother. Estraline. I read the death records, but those are just dates and causes. Who was she? I leaned back to look at him, surprised by the question. I never knew her. She died birthing me. But your father must have told you about her. Kept her memory alive somehow. I thought about the few stories Thandorius had shared over the years, usually late at night, when the wine made him maudlin. She was a scholar, loved ancient history and linguistics, like your Meredith. My father said she could read 7 languages fluently, and was working on an 8th when she got pregnant with me. She would have loved the vault, Zephyrion said softly. Probably. I smiled despite the ache in my chest. Thandorius said she knew about the tribute system, knew the risk of having a daughter. She chose to have me anyway. Chose to die for me. She chose to give you life, Zephyrion corrected gently. That's different from choosing to die. Is it? I looked at him, really looked at him. You're choosing to give everyone else life by giving up yours. How is that different? He was quiet for a long moment. I suppose it isn't. Maybe we all just do the best we can to leave the world better than we found it, even if that means leaving it entirely. That's a depressing philosophy. I've had 300 years to get depressed. But his smile took the edge off the words. Come on, let's go inside. I promised you 2 days of not being alone, and standing on a freezing tower platform isn't exactly comfortable companionship. He led me back to his private chambers. Not the luxurious suite I'd been given, but his actual living space. It was surprisingly sparse for a dragon king. A large bed, yes, but also walls lined with bookshelves, a desk covered in papers and maps, windows that could be thrown open to allow dragon form entry. This is where you live? I asked, surprised by the lack of ostentation. This is where I exist, he corrected. I stopped living about 200 years ago. Now I just occupy space and try not to cause too much damage. He moved to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of something amber-colored. Wine? I find it helps with the existential dread. Yes, please. He poured 2 glasses and handed me one. We settled on a low couch near the window, close but not quite touching. So, he said, 2 days left. How should we spend them? More tours of the fortress? Philosophical debates about the nature of sacrifice? Brooding dramatically while staring at sunsets? Despite everything, I laughed. Is that what you do? Brood dramatically? I'm a 300-year-old dragon trapped by my dead fathers. Blood magic. Dramatic brooding is practically a requirement. He took a sip of wine. But I'd rather not do it for my last 2 days if it's all the same to you. What would you rather do? He looked at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. I want to know you. Everything about you? What made you choose to be a soldier instead of trying to hide as a merchant's daughter or a farmer's wife? What's your favorite time of day? What makes you laugh? What keeps you awake at night? He set down his glass. I want to memorize you, Olivia, so that when I cease to exist, the last thing I'm thinking about is someone real, someone who mattered. The raw honesty in his voice made my eyes burn with unshed tears. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you've known for 2 days. I know. I'm sorry. I don't mean to burden you. I'm not saying no, I interrupted. I'm just saying, I don't know if I'm interesting enough to be someone's last thoughts. I've spent most of my life pretending to be someone else. I'm not sure I know who I really am well enough to share her. Then we'll figure it out together. He shifted closer, taking my hand. Tell me something true. Anything. Just one real thing about Olivia. Not Oliver. I thought about it. About all the things I'd kept hidden for 18 years. I hate the smell of leather. I said finally. Everyone else associates it with horses and adventure and martial glory. But to me, it's always been the smell of bindings, of compression, of hiding. What do you like the smell of? Old books, fresh bread, rain on stone. I surprised myself with the answer, pulling up sense memories I'd suppressed. When I was little, before the training started, Thandorius used to take me to the markets on rainy days. We'd duck into the baker's shop and he'd buy me honey cakes. I felt safe there. Do you feel safe now? His thumb traced circles on my palm. I looked at him, really looked at him. This dragon who could kill me, with a thought. Who'd ripped away my disguise and could have destroyed everything I was. Who instead had shown me kindness and vulnerability, and a desperate need for connection. Yes, I realized. Strangely, I do. Good. He raised my hand and pressed a kiss to my knuckles. You should feel safe. You've always been safe with me, Olivia, even when I was being dramatic in the throne room. That was quite a performance. I'm a dragon. Dramatic performances are our specialty. His smile faded. But the performance ends now. For these last 2 days, no more Dragon King. No more tributary obligations. Just Zephyrion and Olivia. 2 people who understand what it's like to be trapped. 2 people who are about to break free, I corrected. One way or another. Yes. He pulled me against his side, and I let myself lean into him, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Tell me more. What's your favorite time of day? Dawn. When the world is quiet and the light is soft and it feels like anything could happen. I paused. What's yours? This. His hand moved to my hair, fingers gentle. Right now. This moment where I'm not alone and someone sees me and the weight of everything doesn't crush quite so hard. We talked through the night, trading stories and confessions and all the small details that made us who we were. I learned that he preferred flying in storms because the chaos felt honest. That he'd tried to learn piano once, but his dragon strength kept breaking the keys. That his favorite food was cherries, of all things, because they were sweet and brief and gone too quickly, like everything good in his long life. He learned that I'd taught myself to read at 4, that I was terrified of deep water because I couldn't swim, that sometimes I still dreamed I was Oliver and woke up confused about which version of myself was real. They're both real, he said when I admitted that. Oliver was real because you needed him to survive. Olivia is real because she's who you are beneath the survival. You contain multitudes. There's no shame in that. You sound like a scholar. I've had 300 years to read a lot of books. His hand hadn't stopped moving through my hair, the gesture soothing. Do you think you'll keep the name? Oliver, I mean? Some part of it? I don't know. Maybe. I shifted to look up at him. Does it matter? Not to me. You could call yourself anything and you'd still be you. He smiled. Though I admit I like Olivia, it suits you. Why? Because it sounds like someone who could bring peace, olive branches and all that. His smile turned sad. Someone who could build something better in the ruins I'm about to leave behind. The reminder of what was coming settled over us like a cold blanket. 2 days. We had 2 days left. And then he would unmake himself to break his father's curse. And I would be left to figure out how to live in the world that came after. I don't want you to die, I said quietly. I know. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. But we both know it's the only way. And honestly, Olivia, I'm tired. I've been tired for longer than you've been alive. The thought of finally resting, it doesn't scare me as much as you might think. It should. Death should scare everyone. Maybe. Or maybe when you've lived long enough, death starts to look like freedom. He shifted so we were face to face. But I'm glad I get these 2 days first. Glad I get to know you before I go. It makes the leaving feel less bitter. I wanted to argue, to insist there had to be another way. But we both knew there wasn't. The vault had been clear. The magic was clear. This was the price, and he'd already decided to pay it. So instead of arguing, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, a question more than a demand. He answered by cupping my face and kissing me back with a gentleness that made my chest ache. There was no urgency to it, no desperate passion, just two lonely people, just finding comfort in connection, knowing their time was limited. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Stay," he whispered. "Sleep here tonight. Let me hold you. Let me pretend, just for a few hours, that I'm not alone." "You're not alone," I said. "Not anymore. Not for whatever time we have left." "Thank you." His arms tightened around me. "Thank you for seeing me. For choosing to stay. For giving me something real before the end." We settled into his bed as the sun began to rise, tangled together in a way that was more about comfort than desire. His warmth wrapped around me like a living blanket. And for the first time in 18 years, I fell asleep as Olivia instead of Oliver. And for the first time in 300 years, Zephyrion fell asleep not alone. Chapter 4. I woke to golden sunlight streaming through the windows, and Zephyrion watching me with an expression of such tender melancholy, it made my heart hurt. "How long have you been awake?" I asked, voice rough with sleep. "A while. I didn't want to waste time sleeping when I could be memorizing this instead." His hand came up to trace the line of my jaw. "One more day after this, Olivia. That's all we have left." The reminder was like cold water, washing away the comfortable warmth of the morning. "Don't. Not yet. Let's just exist for a while, before we have to think about the end." "All right." He pulled me closer. "What do you want to do with our second to last day?" "Something normal," I decided. "Something that has nothing to do with treaties or magic or death. Just life." He smiled at that. "I can work with that. Come on." He led me through the fortress to a section I hadn't seen before. A massive conservatory filled with plants from every corner of the known world. Trees grew through cleverly designed openings in the glass ceiling, and the air was thick with humidity and the scent of growing things. "I built this about 50 years ago," Zephyrion explained as we walked through the green maze. "Needed something to nurture instead of just maintaining. Something that grew instead of remaining static. It's beautiful. It's therapy." He plucked a small orange fruit from a tree and handed it to me. "Try that. Careful of the seeds." I bit into it, and flavor exploded across my tongue, sweet and tart, and unlike anything I'd tasted before. "What is it?" "A type of citrus from the southern archipelago. They can't grow naturally in Valcrest's climate, but with the right environment," he gestured around us, "life finds a way." We spent the morning wandering through the conservatory, and Zephyrion proved to be surprisingly knowledgeable about cultivation and crossbreeding, and the delicate balance required to keep exotic plants alive in foreign soil. "You're a gardener," I said, delighted by this discovery. "I'm a dragon with too much time and a need for projects that don't involve politics or violence." But he looked pleased at my reaction. "Besides, plants are honest. They grow if you give them what they need. They die if you don't. There's no deception, no hidden agendas. Just life and death and the work of encouraging one over the other." "You should have been a scholar," I said. "Like my mother. You would have been happier." Maybe. He led me to a bench beneath a flowering tree I didn't recognize. But I was born to power, and power comes with obligations. I couldn't just walk away from being the Dragon King, not without triggering my father's magic. So I've done what I could within my constraints. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching light filter through the leaves and listening to the drip of water from the irrigation system. What happens after? I asked finally. After you're gone. How does the ritual actually work? 3 days from when I made the offer, which means tomorrow at dawn, we go to the ritual chamber beneath the fortress. There's a circle there, carved by my father when he created the treaty. I stand in the center. You stand outside it. His voice was steady, matter of fact. I speak the words of unbinding. The magic will fight. It was designed to resist breaking. But when I offer my life force willingly, when I choose to let it consume me rather than resist, the binding will shatter. And you'll die. I'll unmake. There's a difference. He took my hand. Death implies there's a body left behind. This is more like erasure. Every part of me that exists will be used as fuel to destroy the magic. When it's done, there will be nothing left, not even ash. I felt tears threatening. How can you be so calm about this? I've had 300 years to come to terms with my own mortality. And honestly, Olivia, I'm tired of existing in the shadow of my father's cruelty. If I can spend my death creating something better, that feels like a worthy end. I still hate it. I know. He pulled me against his side. But you understand why it's necessary. That's what matters. What about your people? The dragons who serve you. What happens to them? Dravencourt will claim the throne. He's old enough and powerful enough to maintain order. And without the treaty binding future Dragon Kings, he'll be free to rule however he chooses. I trust him to choose wisely. And the tributes? They'll be free. Immediately. Completely. The magic will shatter the moment I'm gone, and there will be nothing binding anyone to anything. Every woman in Valcrest will wake up the next morning knowing she can't be claimed. His voice held quiet satisfaction. That's worth everything, Olivia. Knowing that no more girls will grow up afraid of turning 18. We sat there for a long time, holding each other while the implications of tomorrow settled over us like a shroud. I wish we had more time, I said finally. I wish I'd found you differently. Maybe met you in your conservatory instead of your throne room. Maybe had years instead of days. If wishes were wings, even humans could fly. But his arm tightened around me. We have what we have. Let's not waste it mourning what we can't change. Then what should we do with the rest of today? He thought about it. I want to fly with you. Really fly, not just be transported by another dragon. I want you to see the world the way I see it. Will you let me? Yes. We left the conservatory and climbed back up to the tower platform from last night. Zephyrion stepped back and began to transform again, his body shifting and expanding into that magnificent draconic form. Climb on, his voice echoed in my mind. Settle between my shoulders, right where the wing joints meet. There are spines you can hold on to. I approached slowly, still awed by the sheer size of him. With his help, I managed to climb up, his foreleg, and settle into position. His scales were warm beneath me, and when I gripped the spines he'd indicated, they felt sturdy enough to support my weight. Ready? Ready. His wings spread wide, and then we launched into the air. Nothing I'd experienced in 18 years of life prepared me for the sensation of flying. Not riding on another dragon's back while being transported, but really flying. Feeling Zephyrion's muscles bunch and release with each wing beat. Feeling the wind tear at me feeling the whole world spread out below like a living map. He flew us out over the kingdom, showing me Valcrest from the perspective that was his birthright. We soared over cities and farmland, mountains and rivers. He flew low enough that I could see people going about their daily lives, blissfully unaware that their world was about to change forever. "This is what I'm protecting," Zephyrion said as we glided on a thermal current. "Not just the treaties and politics and structures, but this. The actual people living their actual lives. That's what makes the sacrifice worth it." I felt tears streaming down my face, torn away by the wind. "I understand." He flew us higher, into the clouds, where the world became white and weightless. We burst through the top and I gasped. Above the clouds, the sun was impossibly bright, the sky an endless expanse of blue. "I come here when I need to remember why I keep going," he said. "Up here, the politics and pain feel distant. Up here, it's just me and the sky and the knowledge that somewhere far below, life continues. That's enough." We stayed up there for hours, flying lazy circles while the sun tracked across the sky. Zephyrion taught me to read the winds, to understand the subtle shifts in his body that preceded turns and dives, and slowly, the terror of flying transformed into exhilaration. "You're laughing," Zephyrion observed, and I realized he was right. I was laughing, great whoops of joy torn away by the wind. "This is incredible," I shouted. "This is freedom," he corrected. "This is what I want for everyone. This feeling of being untethered from everything that weighs us down." By the time we descended back to the fortress, the sun was setting, and my entire body ached from gripping his spines. But I'd never felt more alive. He transformed back to human form and caught me as I slid off his back, my legs too shaky to support me immediately. That was... I couldn't find words. "Worth it?" he asked softly. "Beyond worth it." I looked up at him. "Thank you for showing me that, for sharing that with me. Thank you for letting me." He steadied me as feeling returned to my legs. I've flown with others before, but never like that. Never with someone who understood what it meant. We made our way back inside as darkness fell. The fortress was quiet. Most of the inhabitants already retired for the night. "One more day," Zephyrion said as we reached his chambers. "Tomorrow morning, the ritual. Do you want to spend tonight alone? I'll understand if..." "No," I cut him off. "I don't want to be alone. I don't want you to be alone. We have one more night. Let's not waste it apart." Relief flooded his features. "Come to bed then. Let me hold you one more time." We settled together in the darkness, wrapped around each other like we could somehow prevent the dawn from coming, if we just held on tight enough. "Olivia?" His voice was quiet in the darkness. "Yes?" "I need to tell you something. Something I should have said earlier." "What?" "I love you." The words came out simple and clear. "I know it's only been 3 days. I know it's impossible and illogical and probably just my loneliness talking. But I love you. I love your courage and your strength and the way you see past the monster to the person underneath. I love that you made me remember what it feels like to hope." My breath caught. "Zephyrion..." "You don't have to say it back. I don't expect you to. I just needed you to know. Before tomorrow. Before I'm gone and it's too late to ever tell you." His arms tightened around me. "I love you. And knowing you has made the last 3 days of my life the best I've ever lived. So thank you. For that gift. For giving me something real before the end." I turned in his arms until we were face to face in the darkness. "I love you too," I whispered. "I don't know how or why or if it makes any sense, but I do. I love you, and I hate that we're out of time." He kissed me then, and it was different from before. There was desperation in it now, grief and love and the bitter knowledge that this was all we would ever have. We clung to each other in the darkness, trying to memorize the feel of each other, the taste, the warmth. We made love that night, slow and tender and heartbreaking. Every touch felt like goodbye. Every whispered word felt like a prayer to gods who'd stopped listening centuries ago. Afterward, we lay tangled together, neither of us willing to sleep and waste what few hours remained. "Promise me something," Zephyrion said as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the windows. "Anything. Live. Really live, not just survive. Become the scholar you wanted to be. Find joy. Build the world I'm dying to create." His hand cupped my face. "Don't let my sacrifice be wasted on a half-life. Only if you promise me something in return. I'm dying in a few hours. I'm not sure I'm in a position to promise anything. Promise me that whatever comes after, whatever existence or non-existence waits beyond the unmaking, you'll be at peace. That you won't regret this." He smiled, sad and beautiful. "I promise. I'm ready, Olivia. I've been ready for a long time. Meeting you just gave me the courage to finally do it." Dawn broke fully, painting his chambers in shades of gold and crimson. It was time. Chapter 5. The ritual chamber was deep beneath the fortress, carved directly into the mountain's heart. Ancient and cold, with a circle etched into the stone floor in lines that glowed faintly with residual magic. This was where Zephyrion's father had created the Treaty of Fire. This was where it would end. Sylvaith, Helena, Meredith, and the other tributes stood against the walls, witnesses to history. Dravencourt stood near the circle's edge, his expression grave. Lord Malacris had been notably uninvited. Zephyrion had made it clear this was not a political event, but a personal one. Zephyrion stood in the center of the circle, wearing simple clothes rather than his usual formal attire. He looked younger somehow, less burdened, as if the decision to finally act had lifted some of the weight he'd carried for so long. I stood just outside the circle, close enough to see every detail of his face, but far enough that the magic wouldn't touch me when it activated. "Are you ready?" I asked, though I wasn't sure if I was asking him or myself. "I've been ready for 300 years. He smiled at me, and it was genuine, almost peaceful. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything, for these 3 days, for seeing me, for loving me despite the impossibility of it all. I wish we had more time. I know. But we have what we have." He took a deep breath. "Step back. Once I begin speaking the words of unbinding, the magic will activate. It's going to fight. It's going to try to stop me. Don't interfere no matter what you see. Promise me." "I promise." He nodded once, then raised his arms and began to speak in a language I didn't recognize. Harsh, guttural sounds that seemed to resonate in my bones. The circle began to glow brighter, responding to his words. At first, nothing seemed to happen. He just stood there, speaking those ancient words, while the light grew steadily brighter. Then the backlash hit. Dark magic erupted from the circle like a living thing, writhing around Zephyrion in tendrils of shadow and rage. This was the treaty fighting back, trying to protect itself. I saw him stagger, saw pain cross his face, but he kept speaking. The temperature in the chamber plummeted, then spiked to unbearable heat. The walls shook. One of the women against the wall cried out, and Sylvaith grabbed her, pulling her close. But Zephyrion never stopped speaking. Even as the dark magic tightened around him, even as golden blood began to drip from his nose and ears, he continued the ritual. Then he switched from the ancient language to something I could understand. I, Zephyrion, last of my father's bloodline, willingly surrender my life force to break the Treaty of Fire. Let every binding fall. Let every chain shatter. Let every woman claimed by this curse walk free. His voice rang through the chamber. This is my choice. This is my will. This is my gift to those who come after. The dark magic constricted violently, and he screamed. The sound of it was terrible, not just physical pain, but something deeper, the sound of a soul being torn apart. I lunged forward instinctively, but Dravencourt caught me, holding me back with dragon strength I couldn't hope to overcome. You promised, he said in my ear. Let him finish. Tears streamed down my face as I watched Zephyrion's body begin to disintegrate. Starting with his extremities, he was breaking apart into motes of golden light, each one representing a piece of himself being consumed to fuel the unmaking of his father's curse. But even as he unmade, even as the magic tore him apart, he kept his eyes on mine, and he was smiling. Worth it, I saw him mouth, though he could no longer speak aloud. You're worth it. The golden light intensified until I couldn't look directly at it. The chamber filled with the sound of something vast and ancient shattering. Not a physical sound, but something felt in the chest, in the soul. The Treaty of Fire was breaking. And then, with one final pulse of light so bright it left after images, it was over. The circle went dark. The magic dissipated. The chamber fell silent. And where Zephyrion had stood, there was nothing. Not even ash. Just empty stone and the lingering warmth of dragon fire. He was gone. I collapsed to my knees, Dravencourt's hold no longer necessary. The grief that crashed over me was overwhelming, drowning. I'd known this was coming. We'd said our goodbyes, but knowing and experiencing were two different things. He was gone. The dragon who'd shown me kindness, who'd loved me in 3 impossible days, who'd given up everything to free people he'd never meet. Gone. Sylveth knelt beside me, pulling me against her shoulder as I sobbed. Around the chamber, the other women were crying too, for the Dragon King who'd protected them, who'd given them freedom within his constraints, who'd chosen death over watching the curse continue. It's done, Dravencourt said, his voice thick with emotion. The binding is broken. I can feel it. The treaty no longer exists. He looked at me, copper eyes bright with unshed tears. He succeeded. He freed you all. At what cost? I choked out. The cost he was willing to pay. Dravencourt moved to where Zephyrion had stood, placing his hand on the empty stone. He was ready, Olivia. He'd been ready for a long time. You just gave him the courage to finally act. I wanted to rage at him, to insist there should have been another way. But there hadn't been. We'd all known that. Zephyrion had spent 300 years searching for an alternative that didn't exist. This was always how it was going to end. Slowly, people began to leave the chamber. The tributes murmured condolences as they passed, but I barely heard them. I couldn't take my eyes off the empty circle where he'd stood. Eventually, only Dravencourt and I remained. He asked me to give you this, the bronze dragon said quietly, pulling a sealed letter from his jacket. He wrote it last night, after you fell asleep. Said you'd need it when the grief became too heavy. I took the letter with shaking hands. My name was written on the front in Zephyrion's elegant script. I'll give you privacy, Dravencourt said. But Olivia? The kingdom will need you. The transition won't be easy. And having someone who understood what he died for, someone he loved, that will matter. Don't disappear into your grief. Honor his sacrifice by living. He left, and I was alone in the chamber where the man I'd loved for 3 impossible days had unmade himself to give me freedom. I opened the letter with trembling hands. Dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the Treaty of Fire is broken. Congratulations. You're free. You're all free. I hope that knowledge brings you some comfort in whatever grief you're feeling. I want you to know that I don't regret this. Not for a moment. Yes, I wish we'd had more time. I wish I could have known you for years instead of days. But those 3 days were worth 3 centuries of loneliness. You gave me something I'd forgotten how to believe in. Hope, connection, love. I've left instructions with Dravencourt. The vault is yours if you want it. All those books, all that knowledge your mother would have loved, they're yours to explore. Become the scholar you wanted to be. Learn everything. Question everything. Build something beautiful with the freedom I died to give you. Don't mourn me too long. I've been alive for 300 years, and most of them were heavy with obligation and loneliness. The last 3 days with you were light. They were joy. They were exactly what I needed before the end. So when you think of me, don't think of the dragon who died. Think of the man who finally felt alive, even if just for a moment. I love you. I will always love you, even if there's no I left to do the loving. Thank you for giving me that. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing to stay when you could have run. Live, Olivia. Live brilliantly. Live freely. Live the life I couldn't. And know that wherever consciousness goes after it unmakes, I'm watching and cheering you on. Forever yours, even in non-existence, Zephyrion. The tears came again, but they were different this time. Not just grief, but gratitude. He'd given me more than freedom from the treaty. He'd given me permission to be myself, to pursue knowledge, to live without fear. He'd given me a future. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it against my chest, feeling the spot where my heart ached with his absence. I promise, I whispered to the empty chamber. I promise I'll live. I'll build something beautiful. I'll make your sacrifice mean something. The stone didn't answer, but somehow I felt like he'd heard me anyway. 6 months later, I stood in the vault that now belonged to me, surrounded by ancient texts and scrolls. I'd moved into the fortress permanently, taking over the research that Meredith and I were conducting together. We were documenting the treaty's creation and destruction, ensuring that history would remember both what Zephyrion's father had done and what Zephyrion himself had sacrificed to undo it. Thandorius had visited twice. The first time, he'd wept to see me alive and free. The second, he'd brought news from the kingdom. The transition was going smoothly. Without the threat of the tribute hanging over them, noble families were allowing their daughters to pursue education, trades, positions of power. The change wasn't complete. Centuries of tradition didn't vanish overnight, but it was happening. Dravencourt ruled with wisdom and compassion, consulting with the former tributes on matters of policy. The fortress had become a kind of refuge for women seeking education or escape from traditional expectations. What Zephyrion had built in secret was now flourishing in the open. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon was full, I thought I felt something. A warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. A presence that felt achingly familiar. I told myself it was just memory, just grief playing tricks. But then I'd find a book I'd been searching for placed prominently on my desk, or wake to find the conservatory's most temperamental plants miraculously thriving. Small things, impossible things. Things that made me wonder if unmaking was truly the end, or just a different kind of transformation. I hope you can see this, I said one night, standing in the chamber where he'd died. I hope wherever you are, you know that it worked. The world is changing, women are free, And I'm living, Zephyrion, just like I promised. I'm living brilliantly. The chamber remained silent, but I could have sworn I felt a warmth brush against my cheek, gentle as a kiss. I love you too, I whispered, and I always will. I left the chamber and climbed to the highest tower, the one where he'd first shown me his true form. The kingdom spread out below, glittering with lights. Somewhere down there, girls were growing up knowing they would never be claimed. Women were making choices about their own lives. The world was slowly becoming the one he'd dreamed of, the one he'd died to create. I stood there until dawn broke, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson, the same colors as dragonfire, the same colors as Zephyrion's tears. And I smiled, because even though my heart still ached with his absence, I knew he was right. These 3 days of knowing him, of loving him, of being seen, they'd been worth everything. He'd given me freedom. I would give him legacy. The world would remember the Dragon King who chose love over power, who chose sacrifice over safety, who spent his last days not alone but understood. And I would make sure that every woman who grew up free knew the price that had been paid for that freedom. It was the least I could do for the man, the dragon, who'd loved me enough to die. The end. What did you think? What was your favorite line from the story? Was Zephyrion's sacrifice worth it? Should there have been another way? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts on these stories. If you enjoyed this, smash that like button and subscribe for more epic romance. I have so many more stories coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.